a lot of money.
No, it's not.
Yes.
Is that all right?
It is.
Talked about doing it.
Oh, no. You want to go.
me then, isn't it?
That's like my entire state.
Have I ever stopped and cut
No,
my
I
own
get it.
hair?
I wouldn't want to leave too. It's my deadbeat mom won't give me
That
money.
is not what I said.
You're just in time.
Hey, thank you for joining us on the Down and Cut today. My guest is Marcus Baker, who is a writer, director based out of Seattle. His short films have been awarded and featured in numerous film festivals across the United States. His work focuses on character-driven narratives rooted in questions of anxiety, community, and interdependence. I love those topics. Marcus also serves as a president and artistic director for the Seattle Film Society, founded in 2023 in Seattle. The Seattle Film Society is a filmmaker-run project dedicated to organizing, cultivating, and celebrating Seattle's filmmaking community. And he is a proud native of Bremerton, Washington. Do you live in Bremerton?
I do not now, but I grew up there. I lived there for about 15 years.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Downey Cut, Marcus. I was going to interrupt myself. I am in Bremerton. That's why I had to ask.
Yeah,
I'm actually currently in Bremerton.
Oh yeah. I grew up there. My parents were in the Salvation Army over there for a really long time, and I went to Olympic High School. I went to Fairview, what is now Fairview Middle School. And I went to elementary school over there, and
wow,
yeah, so the roots run deep.
What caused you to move out of Bremerton? You're in Seattle then? I take it.
I am, yeah. So what had caused me to move was that I just wanted to explore the film community in Seattle. I'd worked at a movie theater over there, what is now Tracyton Cinemas, I think, when it was Olympic Cinemas. And I had worked there for a long time, and I'd always wanted to make movies, and so I knew that I could do that to some degree in Bremerton, but if I really wanted to, pursue my dreams at the level I wanted to, I needed to make a change. So.
So you're telling me that I need to move back to Seattle. That's usually, I mean, there's a lot of events, and you're right. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Seattle, and I usually don't go because I'm in Bremerton, and now that I have a wife and kids, and it's like, okay, kids plural, one's on the way, folks. So, it's that commute, and then staying out too late, getting back, and trying to juggle the time frames and stuff. Yeah, which is another reason why I started the podcast, because I thought, well, this is another way to network with people, and and we can help each other and promote each other and all that. So, Marcus, so we haven't met officially, but I'm looking at your IMDb and I'm trying to see if there's anything that we've crossed paths on. I'm not seeing anything.
Yeah, that sure IMDb is pretty out of date. I can tell you that much. I'll go in and update it from time to time, but you have to update it through IMDb Pro, and then you have to keep IMDb Pro to keep the updates you made, and I never do that. So it's a whole strange thing. But
so there's more to your resume than what's on here, is what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, before we get deep dive, I want to find out how you gave us a little bit of a snippet in Bremerton. You wanted to get into filmmaking. What sparked that interest in getting into this community? And I see you have writer, director, producer, production assistant. You have all of these on your resume. What is it that really kind of brought you to being a director and writer?
Yeah. So I initially I had gotten into initially I'd seen a bunch of movies that I loved, and that's how most of us really get into movie making, I saw The Dark Knight when I was, I think, 14, 15, and I remember just being really bowled over by it, and it really I think I remember leaving the theater and feeling like I didn't know movies could do that, you know? I didn't know that films could like take on the sorts of topics that film tackled, and address the sort of themes and ideas, while also being, you know, a very affecting drama and all sorts of things like that. And, you know, I was 15 and it like really, it knocked my socks off. And I became really pretty obsessed with that movie, but more than that, I became obsessed with finding out why that movie made me feel the way it did. And that was what got me started on reading film criticism, which has really been my main entryway into filmmaking. I got very into film criticism throughout the end of my teenage years and going through most of my 20s, where I was reading a lot of Emily St. John's criticism, a lot of Film Crit Hulk, a lot of those 2010s internet film critics, a lot of Brightwall Darkroom, things like that, and just trying to get a handle on how film language functioned, and how a film could operate in such a way that it creates an emotional response in the viewer. Because I was just really fascinated by that facet of it, I think. And as I started to read more, as I started to learn more, I wanted to, you know, start making my own films. And at the time I was living over in Bremerton, and I was reading a lot, and I was like making little shorts with friends. I'd gone to Olympic College. I went to their film program, and I just decided once I graduated to make the leap over to Seattle. I started working in production over here, primarily on commercials, a lot of reality TV. I worked on The Real World when it shot in Seattle. I worked on 50 Shades of Grey when it shot in Seattle. You know, I worked on all these jobs, just trying to get my foot in the door, trying to gain an understanding of the industry and how it all worked, and making friends and that kind of thing. And those were a lot of my first experiences as a production assistant, as a production coordinator. I later moved to Los Angeles, and when I moved to LA, I was there for about 3 years. I was working in post-production, first as a post-production assistant, then as a coordinator, and then about a year into that, I realized I wasn't really doing what I wanted to be doing. You know, I'd moved to LA with ambitions to write and direct, and I wasn't doing it. Post-production in particular, well, you know, you'll be working 12 to 14-hour days for 6 days a week if you're freelancing, and it was just eating up my time, and then I'd finish a job and I wouldn't have the energy to write. So I left that. I got a day job as a barista at Starbucks, and I just started making stuff. At first, I had originally set out to make a short a month, and that was so this is 2019, and I made it so that was in January that I set that goal, and then I made it to about April before I ran out of money.
Yeah.
True story. But at that, yeah, exactly. But at that point, I'd already like kind of taught myself how to make things, and I already had eyes on making something that was a bit more sizable and a bit more challenging. And so later that year, I made what I call my first short film, which is called Counterweight. And then it just kind of continued from there. We shot that in August 2019. We finished in December 2020, and then, excuse me, December 2019. We started submitting to festivals in January 2020, and then that all got kind of kneecapped. Yeah, and it's just kind of continued from there, where, you know, I've made a couple shorts now, and I really love doing it, and I think that was a lot of how I came around to it, was just starting small and just kind of building up to the next thing, and then building up to the next thing, and building up to the next thing, you know?
That's awesome. I gotta ask you some, man. You hit some beats here for me.
Yeah.
How did you get on the sets of like the Real World and 50 Shades of Grey? How did you get that job? How did that work?
Yeah, for like 50 Shades, I think I had a friend that pulled me onto it. Um, that's one of the cool things about film production is it's, once you get your foot in the door, assuming you make a good impression on someone that you're working with, they'll hopefully pull you on to the next thing. Um, and what I find, especially in the Seattle filmmaking community, is that people are very generous and that they want to, if you want to work in camera, you can just express that and people will do what they can to like shuttle you over there, like, you might not be, on camera the first time that you're on a set, but if you tell someone, hey, I want to work in camera, then like next time you might be pulled on as a camera PA, so they can start training you up and bringing you into that. And then as far as the Real World goes, I honestly, I couldn't even tell you. It's kind of a fever dream that I even did that job. I was on it as a DIT, which I was not qualified to do or really good at, but I did it for a summer, and yeah, what a time it was.
So, describe what a DIT is for the newbies.
Yes, so a DIT is I'm not even sure of like I think I'm not even sure the actual like breakdown of what the acronym means, but I believe it's like it's the person that essentially when a film is shot or when a footage is shot on a digital camera, it's shot onto a memory card or it's recorded onto a memory card. And once that card is full, that card is then delivered to the person who's called a DIT, and that person then puts the footage in the computer, essentially puts it on hard drives, organizes it, and just kind of gets everything so that it's easy to begin the editing process, essentially.
Gotta love technology. It's a digital imaging technician.
Yes,
versus someone who takes the reel of film off a camera and puts it.
Yeah, I think the like analog comp to it is a loader. I'm not 100% on that.
Makes sense. Well, that's pretty amazing. So you were part of the crew then? You just knew someone that was part of the crew and they said, hey, come aboard. Did you have to be union or did you have to join a union to do any of that?
So I did not when I was starting out, and I know that like when you do join unions as crews, there's certainly a number of variables there. There's a certain number of hours on set, a certain number of hours on a union set. I never got to that point. I didn't work in production long enough, quite frankly, and it wasn't a huge. It wasn't a huge gap trying to get onto set, especially in like an entry level role. But certainly, like I'm very pro labor and very pro union, so I really respect what those guys do. So
that's awesome. I think because you kind of like being in that situation is like a dream come true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how they get their foot in the door and they start climbing. I want to go back a little bit. You saw Batman, The Dark Knight, something clicked, and probably the emotional impact it had, the story it had. What at that point, like you said, you started reading film criticism, which honestly, I'm trying to remember if I even heard of this, but it rings a bell. I think the title seems to jog my memory, but you started reading that. Was it to dissect movies, to understand the process and what people like, what they didn't like? And then correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of throwing stuff out there to see if it sticks. Did it then, like at what point was it because of that, reading those articles and reviews and everything, that you said, I want to write?
Yeah. So I had always been a writer in some form. When I was in school, you couldn't get me to pass a math class, but I could breeze through any English class I needed to. And so my background has really always been in writing in some capacity. And that was a lot of how I came to film too. When I was in high school, I was writing little scripts, and I was writing, little projects, and I've seen some of them now and they're not good, but I can see that I was like, lurching towards something.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, and so I think that was a lot of it. And then as far as the actual film criticism piece, definitely I think that's spot on. I was really, when I saw The Dark Knight, and then as I, proceeded to see more movies and that kind of thing, I was really trying to gain an understanding of how film as a medium functioned, and why it had such an intense effect on me. Another example I can think of is I remember seeing the Harrison Ford movie, Air Force One. My dad rented it from Blockbuster one night, and we watched it, and I couldn't get through the first like 10 minutes. I must have been like 10 years old, but I like couldn't get through it. I was so freaked out. It was so intense. And I think I've always just been fascinated by what causes an emotional response in someone, what causes someone to have such a strong reaction to something like that. And I feel very lucky that I was able to find the film critics that I was able to find, because they really help. Film criticism is so good at just explaining how something functions. If you're watching a movie, or if you're watching like a series of movies by a director or something like that, it can help you understand not only how the film itself operates, but like where the director's thematic interests are, where what an actor is doing, what the camera is actually doing, and how it's supporting the narrative. Like, film is such a dense medium that's often thought of as a very shallow medium, and I love that you can do so much with it without people even noticing.
What did you go to school, film school at all, or take any script writing classes?
So I took some courses. I went to Olympic College in Bremerton, and I took some courses over there when I think their film program was just getting going, I think. And so I took some courses there. But other than that, no, I pretty much self-taught.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I don't. I think in a lot of respects that was the right call, because I have friends who went to film school and they have a lot of debt now, unfortunately. So
yeah, I think the more you can learn on your own, it actually does a couple of things. It takes you out of this structured box, and so you can approach it from different angles, and then also it shows your tenacity, your courage to keep on going, versus dishing out money going, oh, I have to do it because I'm paying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just flips it on its head. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down deep, but I want to touch real briefly on you being the president and artistic director for Seattle Film Society. How did that happen? How did that develop? Did you start it?
Yes. So we founded that. I founded that with a group of filmmakers. The other filmmakers being, I'm going to run down my list here. Tommy Mizell, Kaylee Quinonez, Harley Sullivan, Katie Peterson, Quentin LeBeau, and Ben Johnson. And we founded that we actually have our 1-year celebration coming up. We're recording this in November 2024. And so our 1-year celebration is coming up for our first ever event, so to speak, which is our locals only screening event. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're really excited, and we're really proud of it. It's been an amazing year. But a lot of that a couple things had kind of grown into that, basically. For one, I had started going to this film discussion group. It was hosted at the Northwest Film Forum. And we were it was this really great experience where I was, meeting and having these big communal conversations, talking about films that I loved and directors that I loved. And it was great to just be a part of something that felt big like that, to be a part of what felt like a real film community. that wasn't necessarily based in production, but was based in like the creative elements of it. And then the other part of it was that I guess I had gone to see SIF's local shorts block, and I think this would have been I guess it would have been in 2023. And at the end of the block, they ushered people out onto the street, and the street was just like the sidewalk was just packed with people. And must have been 200 people on the sidewalk. And no one left. Like everyone just hung out and talked. And I started to think about it in the sense that a lot of those people probably don't get to see each other very often. The times that they probably really get to see each other are at work. And so what if there was a space where people had the opportunity to engage with films, but also to engage with each other on a consistent basis, and to really build like a more central sort of community, a central communal hub, if you will. And the other part of it was just I worked with I'd known Tommy and Kaylee and Quentin and Harley and all these people, and we had this meeting pretty early on where we were talking to I think a group of 10 or so people about just some problems that were facing the Seattle filmmaking community, and we realized that there was just so much more that could be done, and we realized that a lot of the pockets of filmmakers in the city weren't talking to each other, and really what needed to happen is just that those pockets needed like a place to meet consistently, a chance to gather and discuss and befriend each other. And there just needed to be some sort of hub that wasn't, bumping into each other at a screening outside SIF or something, and I feel so lucky that, we've had such a positive response to it. We have had our monthly event titled Locals Only, where we screen three to four locally made short films. And we've done that every month for the past year. And it's been a huge success. People have really responded to it. We're launching another event now titled In Focus, where we'll be screening one filmmaker's films, kind of a director's showcase. And that's been amazing. We just sold out our first one of those. So we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on, and it's been really phenomenal to be a part of something that the community has responded to.
We'll definitely put it in the show notes. Where is your screenings? Where are they located?
So we kind of like to pop up. They're kind of pop-up events essentially. So Locals Only. Yeah, so Locals Only takes place at 18th and Union Art Space, which is in the Central District in Seattle. And
Nice.
And then In Focus will be taking place at the Northwest Film Forum. We also have a couple other events that we're still kind of working out the details on, but those will be popping up around the city. And then the other big thing is that we have a Discord channel, and our Discord channel, we hold our screenwriting club, we hold our film discussion group there, and that's another interface for us to use and try and grow the community. So it's all about building community.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is like, at what point? So when you build this community, how does it progress? You know what I mean? Where you have, is there more of? I don't even know how to. I'm just throwing stuff out there because I'm trying to think. If you have a huge community, it's a film hub. Where do you go from there? Everyone knows each other. Then what? Do you guys try to make something together, or is there like a film competition you're gonna sponsor, or is it just pushing out scripts and having everyone kind of give you feedback, or it's just a community of people you just gather with and like-minded people?
Yeah, I think it's the last one, quite honestly.
Yeah.
There's, we've got big ambitions for it in the longer term, but I don't necessarily think of it as something with like a a strict goal. I think I tend to think of it as an event where, or not as an event, but as a community that's just designed to support each other and to help people feel connected to the film community here. Um, Certainly, I think there's a lot of room for growth, and I think there's a lot of ways that we can be supporting each other, that we can be providing more resources for filmmaking in the city, in the region in general, really. I just think there's always more we can be doing to support our local artists. And there's a bunch of wonderful organizations in the city already, and we just want to be a part of that. So
That's awesome. Makes
yeah.
me wish I lived closer.
Hey,
Like, I
you
want to
look, you're
go.
always welcome at one of the events. We'd love to have you. Give me a shout. We'll cover your ticket.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think so. Let me ask you this: from your experience in the film community, do you find, and this is kind of a made-up imaginary thing, but I think some people feel it but don't say it. Do you find there's some competition amongst us local filmmakers, or do you think it's more of a cohesive collaboration of like we want each other to win?
I think it can be a little bit of both. I mean, I think in any I think in any sort of large group of people, there's going to be some uh competition or jealousy or anything like that. It's just kind of, it's natural human emotion. But I think that, like, it's equally important to recognize our better angels, so to speak, and to try and recognize that, the person that I am seeing their film, just because just because they have a film and I don't have a film, doesn't mean they're my enemy, and I think something I always try and remind myself is that you're always just competing against yourself at the end of the day. You're not like, I I'm not like this is an extreme example, but, like, I'm not hoping to be Steven Spielberg, like, I can't be mad at Steven
Yeah,
Spielberg because he's made a bunch of movies and I haven't, like, I love
right.
Steven Spielberg's movies, but, like, at the end of the day, like, I'm not trying to make a Steven Spielberg movie. I'm trying to make a Marcus Baker movie, and that's what really matters, is making the best Marcus Baker movie that I can. And so I see some competition sometimes, and we do get asked a lot whether or not we want to turn the Film Society into some sort of, like, 48-hour competition or anything like that. And I've always been pretty resistant to that. I think I just I don't think there's a need for more competition, quite honestly. I think if anything, there's a need to really support each other and, keep trying to build up our access and our resources and keep sharing information, because I think at the end of the day, that's how we're going to go further. It's not necessarily one person against another person. So
I agree. I think the competition of you setting out to make a short film every month, that's pretty competitive against yourself.
it was, and the thing is, I actually lost the competition. That's the crazy part.
I look at people who do that, at least once a quarter they'll make something, and I'm just like, man, I wish I had the time to do that.
Yeah,
I wish I could just go out and film and do that type of thing.
yeah.
But I think that's great. We'll talk about a little about your films here in a sec, but with your experience, and you've been in the community and you directing and writing, something I ask everyone,
Mhm.
what makes a good actor?
Oh man. Um, I think I think it's a question as much of, like, what makes a good director, I think for a question like that, I think you always want to be listening. And I that's the thing I always read about actors. That's certainly been true in my experience, and it's been very true in my experience as a director, is that you want to be a good listener as well. because as an actor, you want them to be in the moment, you want them to be responding to the person in front of them rather than having their lines memorized. And I'm a director that, like, I don't care so much if the line is wrong as long as the emotion is there. And to me, that's what's always going to trump anything regarding a specific line rating. And so I want an actor that's going to be listening. I want an actor that's going to be present. And I think I think those are the two most important things, because otherwise you're just watching an actor read lines on screen. And to me, that's always, I understand, like, the fear of, like, oh, what if I forget my line or anything like that. But at the end of the day, like, I care less about the line than I care about um, getting the emotion right. Because I think as long as the audience is able to track the emotion and able to follow the emotion, that's how your movie lives or dies, essentially.
So you're the director I want to work with then. That's what it boils
Hey,
down
give me a
to.
shout. Give me a shout.
What would you say is the most constructive criticism that you've ever received in your film career?
Oh, that's a great question. I feel like that's man, that's a really great question. The one that always sticks with me um is that I remember the first time I'd ever written a feature film. I have a close friend who was also, like, a fairly established writer, um, and I remember I'd sent them the script and I, like, asked them for notes, and they suggested we get on a phone call, and I, like, had gotten on the call, jazzed up, excited to talk about the script. And the first thing they asked me was, what does this character want? And I didn't have an answer. And I was like, I like, wrecked me. Because then, like, the first, like, the rest of that call just ended up being, not, I wouldn't say an evisceration, because she was very nice about it. She was very like, here's some things you can make your script better. Here's some things you can do to make the script better. Here's some things you can do to write a better character, that kind of thing. But I think it was the fact of, like, not having an answer for the very first question that just really, like, shook my confidence. And I think it was an important moment, quite honestly, because I think that's an answer you have to know the answer, or that's a question you have to know the answer to as the filmmaker behind it, as the writer behind it, as the director behind it, anything. Um, and B, I think it's important to approach every project with as little ego as possible. I think one of the other things that I'm very passionate about is just, I don't care about my ego. Like, I care about making good work. And I want the project to be good. I want the story to be good. I want it to be interesting and compelling and all these things. And you don't get that unless you're willing to set aside your own ego. Because if you have an ego going through the creative process, oftentimes what's going to happen is you're not going to kill your darling when you need to kill the darling. You're going to get deep, and you're going to get through your first cut of your film, and you're going to, like, want to launch yourself off a building. And you have to be willing to, like, you have to be willing to accept failure, and not only accept failure, but, like, assume failure and be willing to build yourself back up from that. And I think going in without an ego is the best way to assure that. So
That's a good. I agree with you 100%. The ego thing is really what I think crushes a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
you
kind of
got to
makes
be
you
persistent. You got to just
yeah.
keep keeping at it. I think that's the other big thing. So
I can relate because I just wrote my first script.
congratulations.
And cousin, yeah, thank you. And I gave it to the lead actor, and he was like, "What's driving the character?" It's like,
Yeah.
I should know this. I
Yeah.
should have known.
Yeah.
And so he came up with the idea of what would drive the character, and I was like, "Oh, okay, thank you."
Yeah.
We wrote it in and everything, but it was just one of those things where you're like, I should have known that. Like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
I thought it
I
was
also,
just greed, but he was
yeah.
like, no, there has to be something more. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but I also think like, and I think I read some quote about it from Barry Jenkins a while ago where he said that like every time he like starts a new script, he like stares at his Oscar from across the room and is like, "How did you get there?" Because like I
That's intimidating.
because every time you're starting fresh, like it, and I think it's so important to remember is
Yeah.
that every time is you're starting fresh, and it doesn't matter if you won an Oscar, it doesn't matter if you have never won an award. Like I love the creative process, but it is like it's so brutal to go through it. And I love writing scripts, but like sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and that's just kind of how
Yeah.
it is.
Do you write with limitations, knowing what your budget is, knowing what you can do, or do you just freely just write?
It depends. I have a project that I'm working on now, that I'm very much writing for the limitations of it. Um, but it's interesting because those limitations have certainly changed as I've made more projects. Um, with my previous couple shorts, it's been, um, what's the most inventive way we can shoot inside my friend's apartment or anything like that. And now I'm starting to think a bit bigger because my ambitions have grown and that kind of thing. Um, and so I certainly am writing with some limitations in mind. Um, but it's more about how can I use those limitations to my advantage, I think. Um, and I think that's always the most important thing because not everyone's going to get to be Christopher Nolan, where you can go to a studio and say, "Hey, I've got our new movie," and they just bless you with $500 million. Like
Right.
they don't like baptize everyone with that amount of money.
Come on
So
in. What
exactly,
can I get for you?
exactly, yeah. So I think it's important to write with those sorts of limitations, or with like a working understanding of what your limitations are, which ones are flexible, and which ones you absolutely can't get around and will probably have to do a major rewrite.
Right. Yes. The I think for me it's always, when it comes to like, do I need to hire this person to do that?
Yeah.
Like a gun wrangler, do I need to do that? Do we need a gaffer? It's just
Yeah.
on and on and on. I think I just need like 15 PAs and I'll train them all how to do whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got two projects that I'm working on. One I'm writing, one I'm in pre-production on, and we're starting to work out the budget, and we're starting to. It's going to be the first one that I've had to raise any money for, and it's a process, and it's scary. I mean, I remember going through the budget a couple weeks ago, and just having because we were trying to hit some number, and I was just like slashing numbers, and I was like, oh man, this feels awful. But
Yeah.
you work with the limitations you have, and you do the best you can, and hopefully you have good collaborators around you who understand and are willing to work with you.
Good tip. So with your experience behind the camera, on production, like Garage Rehab, Save Our Shelter, how has that shaped your understanding of the production process and what lessons do you bring when you take it into your own projects?
Yeah. I mean, when I was getting started, I was doing a lot of reality television in particular. Um, And I think, especially when you're getting started, it's important to really just like throw yourself into it. Um, because I, I had known for a long time that I wanted to write and direct. Um, but I think it would be one thing if I was fresh out of film school and was like, yelling at my gaffer who's like been in the industry for 40 years and like I'm yelling at them how to turn on the light. I think that'd be one thing.
Right.
Whereas I think one of the things that just having that baseline of experience on set gave me is just an understanding of what's happening, for one, and also some empathy for my crews, because you hear it all the time about directors who are slave drivers, and like I would never want to be that way. Like I want to work with people that want to work with me, um, and to I want to make sure that I am respecting my crew's time, and their lives outside of set. I mean, certainly, like, not to like denigrate his passion for the medium or a project or anything like that, but when I'm making a project, I mean, I'm locked into the project. I am with that project 24 hours a day, 7 days a week until it is completed. Um, but if I am hiring a crew member for a job or to shoot my film, to light my film, etc., I can't expect the same thing of them. But and so it's up to me to like show up and be prepared and make sure that that person gets home in time to like see their child before they go to bed, and so I think that's probably the biggest thing that it gave me, is just a sense of like what goes into making a film, the type of hours that making a film can sometimes require, and to also be extremely respectful of your crews, because I've been on sets where everything goes wrong very quickly and morale dips, and you never want I would never want to be in charge of a set like that. I'd certainly never want to put my crews through anything like that.
Yeah, that's horrible. The let's talk about reality TV real quick.
Yeah.
It's not really reality, is it?
Some parts are real, but I think it it's yeah. I mean, it's a little it can be a little bit of a tough answer, I'd say. I've been on sets where like, you're seeing some stuff that's very real as it's going down. But
Sure.
I've also been on sets where, there's a producer off camera and they're like whispering like, what if you like rephrased it like this, So
I
it really depends.
I've been on reality TV and it never got aired.
Okay.
And it was called Technology Jones.
Okay.
And I was hired as a bar owner, the
Okay.
manager of a bar,
Mm-hmm.
an actor who doesn't own a bar, but it was reality.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
told the situation,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to approach the situation as if I was the bar owner and people were going to come and get things. It was just interesting to me. And so I thought, okay, that blew my mind. From then on, I was like, okay, I get it. I know how this stuff works now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I worked on Bar Rescue at one point, and I remember they like brought in like hundreds of people for this event, and like, your B-roll might be real, so to speak, but like, you've got a host going up to a table and like maybe you shoot that for 3 takes instead of like one.
Yeah,
So, um,
exactly.
and
Yep.
and maybe you finesse it. You do little nips and tucks in the edit, that kind of thing. So, I mean, as far as the actual reality of it, it's a medium like any other. And there's tropes to it. There's things that are native to it, and it gets a bad rap. But I mean, I watched The Golden Bachelorette with my partner, so who am I to say?
But in your mind, you're not dissecting it and going,
No, I think what I end up dissecting the most is because also like usually when we'll watch The Golden Bachelor, we'll crack open a bottle of wine and
okay,
we'll just like
you're
yeah,
just
we'll
taking
just
it in.
yeah, we're just taking it in and we're just gabbing the entire time and shit talking them, and but I also think that's kind of like the fun of watching reality TV in some respects, depending on what you're watching.
Yeah.
Um but I don't know that I really take it apart too much. There was a period of time, and I think it does still happen when I'm in pre-production for a movie, especially when I'm like really close to filming a movie, where I like can't watch anything. It's like my brain is like overflowing with information, and I have seen everything that I can possibly like take in, and I just need to stop. And so usually
Yeah.
before I actually shoot a movie, I'll take a bit of a break and I don't watch anything through it, and then it'll take me a while before I start picking things up again. But I don't. It's pretty rare that I like uh can't stop myself from dissecting something, I would say. I think when I was younger, it was a little harder, but I think I've learned to like kind of draw the line now, for the most part.
I can't do it.
Hey, I get it, man.
I'm
It's tough.
chopping it up left and right and going, how did they do that? Oh, I know how they did that.
Yep. I understand.
Wait, when you look at the different genres that you've been a part of,
Mhm.
how have they made a difference and influenced you in your storytelling approach as a director and writer?
Yeah, I don't know if that's had too much of an influence on um, the actual like making of the things that I've made. I think there's certainly been instances and experiences that I've had on those projects that have um, I've jotted them down and been like, oh, it'd be really cool to make something about that. Like um,
Yeah.
just because I think in a lot of those situations, you're dealing, especially in reality, and definitely in award shows, you're dealing with a lot of like crunch time decision making and a lot of very intense personalities. In reality, I find that,
That's some fuel, though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
that's got to be
yeah,
some fuel.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that, especially in reality, I mean, reality is such a grind. And it sounds like you have some experience with that as well. Reality can be such a grind. And the people that like love it really love it. I knew a guy that he was on the camera crew for Survivor, and like he just like he like what is that? Eat, drank, breathed it. Like it was everything for him. He loved it.
Like
But
an adrenaline rush.
yeah. But at the same time, if it's not for you, it's not for you, and it was not for me. Um, so it's interesting as someone who kind of sits outside of that. Um, looking at it and looking at those types of people, because I do find that part of it fascinating. What drives someone to want to do that? Um, what would make someone so what would make someone want to pursue that line of work? I think I'm
Mhm.
a pretty naturally curious person in that way. And I don't know that reality TV is ever really going to be for me in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I agree with you. What about creative growth through collaboration,
Mhm.
as far as working in production staff? Did I say that right? Staff.
Yeah,
I'm getting kind of loopy. I'm just drinking
yeah,
coffee, really.
yeah.
Uh, Production staff roles with large teams, high profile projects like the Oscars. How do you collaborate with experienced industry professionals, and how does that impact your creative vision and your approach to leadership?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of those experiences, again, kind of give you an understanding of what goes into something like that. Certainly when I worked on, something as big and important as the Oscars and that kind of thing, um, I spent a lot of my time just like learning and just listening and hearing the way that people talk to each other and watching the way that people interacted. You find out. I got to go to the Oscars that year. That was 2017, I think, the year that Shape of Water won. The year that Get Out was nominated, and I remember like sitting at the bar like in this room full of celebrities and seeing like Paul Thomas Anderson and Jordan Peele having a conversation, and like while at the same time being like none of these people know me. None of these people want to be bothered. I saw Oscar Isaac like at the bar just like pounding like shots because he's bored out of his mind. Um,
It's like, please get me out of here.
yeah, and I think that in a way that like that sort of demystification of it, it sounds funny, but I think that sort of demystification is really important, because at the end of the day, like it is a job, and I love filmmaking. Filmmaking is what I love doing. I love writing, I love directing, I love collaborating with actors, I love shooting the movie, cutting the movie, and anything and everything regarding the actual making of the movie. But anything relating to award shows or anything of that ilk is something separate. And I think that's an important distinction that a lot of people don't necessarily make, because like recognition for your work is one thing. Like, I imagine your quote goes up if you win an Oscar, but at the same time, like, I don't care so much about recognition as much as I care about making good work. And I think that's something I wouldn't have known had I not gone through that process. And so within that, I mean, as far as the actual leadership element of it goes, it does influence the idea of what makes good work. How do we put our best foot forward today? How do we move this team forward so that we're able to create the best? When I worked on the Oscars, it was like it was clip packages for different awards. So like best actresses or like best actress, and it would be like a package of clips that played before that showed like all the nominees essentially. And so how do we make the best clip package that we can that shows everything we need to see in like 10 seconds, and that's a skill. That is a huge skill, is being able to like show something quickly and succinctly and communicate an entire like range of a performance in like a 5 to 10 second clip, and being able to identify that, being able to cut it together seamlessly with other clips. That's a whole skill set. And so I think a lot of what I took from the Oscars and the Emmys and a lot of those sorts of experiences is being able to recognize that skill in another person, and learning how to help guide a team forward as you're kind of moving through that sort of process.
So you were doing the post-production on those clips? Were you
I
were
so
editing them?
I was a post-production PA, so I was not cutting anything. Thank God,
Okay.
I didn't know anything about those clips at that time. But I was able to like sit in with the editors and watch them as they worked, watch how quickly they worked, watch how they made their decisions, and of course get them coffee when they asked for it. You're
I was gonna say all the
yeah.
actors can send you you could just make their reels for them. 'Cause that's pretty much what
Exactly.
they're doing. They're making
Oh,
reels, right?
God, yeah. No, I think one of the real like I think that's one of the other huge benefits of being a PA on a set like that or on a project like that is that you can just be a sponge. And like when you're young and you just are wanting to like get started in the industry and try to like get an understanding of how it all works, like be sitting in the background and being a sponge is the best thing you can do. In the moment that you are no longer a sponge, that's when you should find either another position that's higher up, or you should leave and do something else, which is what I ended up doing because I realized I wanted to direct. I didn't want to be cutting clips on the Oscars. I didn't want to be doing the things that I was doing essentially. And if you're not doing what you want to be doing, you should try and find a way to get there.
How did you land that position?
I had a friend
Working.
of a I had a friend of a friend that had pulled me onto it. I had
So it's all networking.
yeah. So I just moved to LA. This is October 2020. No, October 2017. I just moved to LA and I'd worked on a couple different reality shows. And I was looking for a gig. And a friend put me in touch with the production coordinator, a friend from Seattle who knew the production coordinator. I think they went way back somehow.
Nice.
And then the production coordinator reached out and pulled me out of the job, and it was good. It was a good time.
Very cool. What so now that you know, being the guy at the bar where nobody knows who you are,
Yep.
now if the things switched, then you become known. I mean, you are known. You're running the Seattle Film Society, and you see someone that you don't recognize. Now you have the courage to go, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like it's like empathy. You're actually putting yourself in their shoes because you were there and you know how it feels.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your shorts, directing your shorts, high concepts, counterweight, 3 women. What is this? Possible fire next door.
Yes. Three women and a possible
Ooh.
fire next door. Yeah.
What drew you to these projects, and how did you approach crafting their narratives and visual style?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so with Counterweight, it's interesting. So, because each of my shorts are different genres, they look very different, they feel very different, and that was obviously a pretty intentional choice. With Counterweight, um, I had written it when I was in the midst of going through the, short a month thing. It was 2019. Um, and I set it aside because I was like, oh, this feels a bit bigger than the other shorts. I don't think I could make this in like a month. Um, and I'd set it aside. And when I came back to it, I was like, okay, this is the thing I want to make. Um, and I honestly, I literally just went and made it. I tried not to think too much about it. Um, I think even at that time, I really wouldn't have known what to think about it. And in a lot of respects, it's the one I'm the most proud of today because it's so unvarnished and um, it's such a weird movie to watch. And I love that I made it and I didn't really know what I was making. I was like, it really was like straight from my brain to the camera, and that's like what came out.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
yeah, and I shot it in black and white because like
Yeah.
at that time, like everything I had made had been in black and white to that point. And so I knew how to shoot in black and white. I knew how to, and we were gonna have to move really quickly. We had to, I think, like our shot list was something. Can I swear on this show?
Yeah.
I think our shot
Yeah.
list was something like absolutely fucking insane, like 70 shots in 2 days or something. Because like at
Holy
that time,
smokes.
I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Like,
At that time, I didn't know like 70 shots is too many shots. Like you shouldn't do that. And so yeah. So, but to be clear, like I mean, the movie came out in a way that I just love, and I love it even more now that I've had some time from it. But as far as the actual visual aesthetic from it, it really came out of like I shot it in black and white, and I had a DP who I trusted and was like, this will all be quicker if we shoot it in black and white, and we don't have to worry about lighting, temperature, and color and all this kind of stuff. Um, so that was
yeah,
a lot of how
that's a
that
true
one had,
statement.
yeah, yeah. And so that was how that one had grown. Um, the short that followed it was called 100. I with Counterweight, it's very much the premise of it is it's this guy who's like wrestling with his self-image in the hours leading up to a party. It's very surreal and dreamlike, and there's a lot of like abstract imagery. Um, and with 100, I wanted to go the complete opposite direction. I wanted to make something that was very grounded, that was very that the drama was there, like nails to the floor, like the drama was like right there. Um, and so I had a really simple situation, which is two people arguing over $100 essentially, and like the way that $100 can feel both like a lot of money and no money at all. And then I at that time I was also watching a lot of family dramas, a lot of Jane Campion and a lot of Elaine May movies, and I wanted to make something like that. And so I had this concept of a mother asking her daughter for money, where you're kind of flipping that power dynamic that's inherently there, um, and you're putting the person who's supposed to be in power at a disadvantage and vice versa. And then I wanted to explore how that simple setup of like a mother asking her daughter for money, when it's what appears to be not a lot of money, but like as you grow up, like $100 is both so much money and it's no money at all. Um, and I really wanted to explore how that impacted this sort of relationship. And so in terms of how we approach that visually, I really wanted it to be a very stark contrast. And my director of photography, Lucas Chappell, um, he he'd approached excuse me, he had pitched me on the idea of us using pools of light essentially, because it's all set in one apartment and it kind of moves throughout the apartment, but we didn't want it to necessarily um, feel like a stage play, you know? So what we did is we basically had these kind of pools of light. We had a pool of light over the dining table. We had pools of light in over the kitchen sink, one over the oven, and like the characters essentially kind of going between these pools of light. And because you're really only getting top down lighting, you're really just getting this very dramatic look. That's very like contributing to how intense and serious it feels. And there, with Counterweight, there had been a lot of music. Something I'm very fond of is collapsing the line between music and sound design. um, and
Yeah.
with 100, I went the complete opposite direction. No music at all. I just wanted it to be the mother, the daughter, and a really sparse sound design. And so that was how that one had really come together. And then Three Women. So the short is called, the full title is called Three
It
Women.
is a full title.
Yeah, the full title is Three Women and a Possible Fire Next Door. That short, again, kind of the opposite direction, and I think that's maybe just how I like to work. But that one had grown out of an event that had happened to me when I lived in LA, where the apartment building next to ours, or the house next to ours, their garage actually, I think, was like smoldering, and there were fire trucks, but no one was telling us to leave. And so we're just watching this event take place, me and my roommates at the time, and we're like, this seems like something we should like evacuate. And it led to an argument among the three of us. And then naturally I was like, oh, I should write this as a movie. And so I wrote the script years ago when I lived in LA, and then I was working on another project up here that had kind of fallen apart. And my producer at the time was like, well, like, you should still make something. We have all these resources. Let's try and move forward with something else. And I had that script lying around, and there was an actress that had auditioned for 100. Her name's Jessica Cruz. That I loved her audition so much. She just wasn't quite right for the lead in that. I really wanted to work with her still. So, and on top of that, I'd seen the short film Impenetrable at SIFF that year. And that short is led by Gina Pietromonaco, who I also really wanted to work with. And then my partner is also an incredible actor. And she and she was like, I'd love to work with you. I'd love to like be directed by you. And it just kind of came together.
That's a plus if it's your partner.
Exactly. And so that project had kind of come together a little bit on a lark in a lot of ways. And I did a pretty significant rewrite. I really love writing for actors when I can. My favorite part of the writing process is writing to an actor, like specifically when I have my actors cast, and then I can just like watch clips and listen to how they speak and all this kind of stuff, and start writing in their voice. Because I like to try and write as close to their voice as I can. In particular, with Three Women and a Possible Fire Next Door, there's a story that Gina tells at the beginning, and she had told that to me. She told that exact story to me when we met to talk about the script for the first time. And I thought it was so funny. I was like, can I write this in? Like, do you mind? And she's like, yeah, like, absolutely. And so I just love being able to like write, go through that whole process. And so that was how that project had come together. As far as how it all looks, we really, again, complete opposite of 100, really gone for much warmer tones. The main color, or the main like kind of inspiration for it was the 2015 Noah Baumbach film Mistress America. I love screwball comedies so much, and I really wanted to make a screwball comedy. So when we were making this film, I was thinking of it as a screwball comedy. Um, and that film has very warm tones, despite being set in New York, which I feel like is always either like blown out lighting wise or looks like Taxi Driver for some reason. Um,
Yeah.
and I just wanted the film to feel very warm, and inviting. It's set in an apartment in uh, these that's this apartment that's rented by two women. So it's not going to necessarily feel like you know it's not going to feel like a sparse. We wanted to feel very warm and homely, with warm lighting, very lived in. And we used, I wish I could remember the filter we used. I want to say it was like a gold dust filter or something, but regardless, it really
Hmm.
added to the overall feeling of the film, I think. Um, and I think that's everything. I know I just went on a whole rant there.
That's all right though. I saw 100 at a film festival,
Okay.
and I was trying to remember if it was this year or last year. I'm trying to
It would have
think.
been
It may have
last year,
been
yeah. Yeah, so
last year. Okay.
the
Yeah.
festival run for that took place last year. We played the West Sound Film Festival, we played the Tacoma Film Festival, played the Poulsbo Film Festival. So it was a good little run.
That's where I saw it was West Sound. What now you edited it,
hmm
and what do you edit on?
I cut that film in Premiere Pro. I
Okay.
at the time I had a MacBook that was a 2012 MacBook, and
Ooh.
it was, I mean, this thing was just beat to shit. It could barely run anything. Um, but I think the only editing program I could get it to run without like completely freezing up every 30 minutes or so was Adobe Premiere. So thank
Yeah.
the Lord that worked. But I remember at one point I had to transfer the entire movie from like one hard drive to another hard drive, and it was like really
Oh my
stressful. I
gosh.
was like, I'm gonna lose, like, what I think
Right.
the movie in total cost like 5 grand, like maybe 3 grand after production. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna lose
Yeah.
all $3,000. Like, just being scared
No
shitless.
pressure or anything. No stress.
Yeah.
What
Oh,
what
God.
do you usually edit? Are you usually, because I saw it on your other film, someone else edited it. What are you, one to edit, or usually one to kind of hand it off to have it edited?
It depends. You know, I wouldn't consider myself an editor by any means. The people that know how to edit really know how to edit. I feel lucky that I have a good friend, my former roommate, Chris Messier. Um, he lives in LA, and he works at Kirk Baxter's company, actually, in down there. And yeah, and he cut 100, and he honestly, bless his heart, he must have done like 20 or $30,000 of free work on counterweights post production, because he did the editing, the sound design, the score, like everything. He was a one man post
Oh, he
production
actually did the
team.
score too.
He did everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was very, very nice of him, and I'm grateful. Um, but he did that. And then on
It's
Three
good to have
Women,
friends.
yeah, it is. I feel very lucky. Yeah. And then on Three Women, he cut Three Women, and he was great. He's just like, he's one of my closest friends. We go way back now. I think I met him when I first moved to LA, and we just immediately hit it off. And I would also say, just in addition to like being a great person and a great editor, he's also the person that's like really taught me the most about film, I would say. He was the first person I was good friends with that was like watching, 3 movies a day, and like reading and like taking it in and living it. And I think having those people around you is so important when you're getting started. And so being able to work with him on Three Women was amazing. And it was great to be able to work with my good friend again.
Let me ask you, do you ever get nervous when, I mean, obviously you guys know each other, so there's that, you have that second hand, and you know each other's styles and what you guys like. But I would think like handing it off, your story, something that you wrote, you directed, handing it off to someone else to edit it. Is there ever a time where you're like, it's not quite how I saw it?
Usually on the first cut, just because on the first cut you're trying to, you don't know what the movie is yet. And I think to me that's always the hardest part, is you make a film, and they always say you make a film 3 times. You write the film, then you shoot the film, and then you cut it. And like, I think it's the Coen brothers has said that like after the first cut of a film they want to hang themselves or something, because you just like you make that first cut, and it's just an assembly cut. It's just so you have something to work with, and you look at it and you have to watch it because it's the only way you're going to recognize what's not working and how to change it and all this kind of stuff. But you just want to die. You just want to crawl under a rock and die.
How
And
many
so I think
drafts?
like, yeah, and so I think like that first cut, that's when I feel nervous, because that's when I'm like, well, I guess I wasted all my money and my time, Um,
No.
but I think it gets better after that.
I hope so. You're like, what did I even do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, essentially, I remember getting to God, because I'm a dedicated planner when I'm shooting.
Yeah.
I show up with a binder, an extensive shot list, my
70
scene
shots, yeah.
breakdowns. Yeah, 70 shots every time, every day, 70 shots. We make it every time too. Um, um, no, I show up and I'm very dedicated, and so especially with that first cut, because I know it's not going to match my vision, it just makes it so much harder, even though
Yeah.
you've done countless hours of planning and prep and testing and collaborating and talking to people and all this kind of stuff, and to do all that work and then and then see the first cut of the film and it's not perfect after all the stuff you've done already is just devastating. So as far as getting nervous
Yeah,
goes, that's probably when I most get nervous.
I edited 2 films that I was a cinematographer for,
Mhm.
and I thought it was easier because I know the shots that I took. You're a director, you hand off your project. Are you guys doing like Zoom calls, or are you guys, if he's in LA, how are you looking at to see what he's doing, and then how do you know what's available as far as what the shot, the shots that
Yeah,
you're not using?
yeah. So I mean, I trust Chris for one. With the project that I'm developing now, I'm going to be cutting it myself, so it'll probably be a little bit different.
Okay.
But for Three Women, I trust Chris, and I mean, we didn't get that many shots, honestly. Like we went in and
Okay.
we shot like we rehearsed for half a day and then we shot a day. And that
Oh,
was
that's
and that
awesome.
was yeah, that was really easy, and it was designed to be like easy and short and in and out. And so, we usually only had 2 or 3 takes, but again, like 2 or 3 takes can cover you can cover a lot of ground. You can get a lot out of those takes, depending on what you need. So as far as like, and then as far as like how it was sent to me or delivered or anything like that, um, Chris was using Frame.io, and he would upload
Okay.
it. He'd upload his version to Frame.io, and then he would send it over for notes. And I would just like
Nice.
input my notes directly into Frame.io. And I think that was most of the process. So we were on like a Zoom call. Maybe we had one scene that we could not get right in the film. Um, and
I
it
like how you say we.
Yeah,
You're like, come on, Chris.
yeah, it
Get
was
it,
his fault.
get it.
Yeah. No, we just like we could not get the scene right no matter what we did, and we at one point we just hopped on a Zoom call, and it was awful because Zoom kept crashing, and then his editing would crash, and it was like a disaster. But we figured out the scene, but it took us probably 6 hours. So
6 hours for one scene? Holy smokes.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Wow. How have
yeah.
you progressed then? If starting from your first film and then progressing as a director and writer, what have you learned the most in doing these projects?
That's a great question.
Have you like changed your style, your workflow, your thought
Yeah.
process? Do
I
you
mean,
always rehearse now?
I think it's interesting. This past year, I reread Sidney Lumet's book, Making Movies, which I'd read when I was in elementary school, um, and I must have been in like sixth grade because I was just curious about how they shot what I now know as coverage. But I remember like seeing like shots in a movie where like you see one person and then it would cut to the other side of it, and I'd be like, how do they film? How do they shoot that with like without showing the camera? How do I not see the camera? So uh,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Pure
but
innocence there.
yeah, exactly. And when I was rereading the book now, it was interesting to see how much of his process was just already a part of my process. I mean, I'm very big on rehearsals. I always wish I had more time to rehearse, um, because I just feel like it's such an important part of the process. And I'm someone that like, when we get to set, like that's that we're filming the movie, we only get so many tries at that, and I would rather do as much prep as we can and then go make the movie rather than like get to set and hope we get it right. So I think probably the biggest thing is just the level of prep that I bring to it now, because I think I show up to set extremely prepared. I want to make sure everyone knows what we're doing. I want to make sure everything's fully communicated. Um, I never want anyone to feel like they don't play a part in the process of the film, whether it's creatively or administratively or anything, because everyone's making the film together. And I I often think that I'm gonna regret saying this at some point, I'm sure, but I think directors get too much credit sometimes because it is like, it's a team effort, and it needs to be a team effort. Everyone is out there. Like, I can't do what my lighting guy does. Like, I can't do what my actors are doing. Like, we're all making this project together. And so I think a lot of my mindset around that has changed. And I think I just know how to approach being on set better. Um, when I made Counterweight, I was an absolute wreck. Like the entire shoot, we shot it in a weekend, and I was a wreck, because I was so nervous. And I remember at one point, like there was a shot we had to get that I had like a team of like 10 people looking directly at me and being like, "Okay, is this the shot you want?" And I was like, uh, uh, uh. And like,
Oh my gosh, I can't.
just like the scariest shit you can imagine. 10 people need the same answer from you all at once, and you don't know the answer.
And they're all
Um,
standing around going,
yeah, yeah. And there's a reason that a lot of directors like love 8.5, and it's because it captures that feeling so well. Um, but I think so much of like how I approach filmmaking now, is that it is a communal and a collaborative event. All this time and planning and all this kind of stuff goes into it, but like, when we get there, like I'm not doing everything, and nor can I try to do everything, nor should I even like approach trying to do everything. It's up to me to hire people who are smarter than me and let them do their job. um, and I think when I was starting out, I didn't know how to do that, which makes sense because I was young and I didn't know how to approach it. how do you approach being a leader of people? But I think now I just feel more confident in my vision. I feel more confident in how I'm approaching the job. And I feel more confident making the films I want to make.
Let me ask you this: before you finalize your film, do you send it out to have any kind of feedback, any kind of constructive criticisms, and people from who are in the film, or friends or family members that can watch it from a different perspective and go and give you feedback? Do you ever do that?
I actually do that throughout the entire process.
Oh,
So
okay.
I so and honestly, that's one of my favorite parts of the process is getting that kind of feedback. Um, I early on in the process, I will when it's in the script stage before we've shot anything, I have a group of friends who are not in film. They're like, they're maybe a bit more artsy than they're maybe a bit more artsy, but they're not necessarily like in the film industry. I call them my brain trust. And
Yeah.
we'll get together, we'll do a reading of the script, and I'll just like ask for their input. I because to me, like, that's the audience. I want to hear. Excuse me, I want to hear from the people that are going to be watching the film and know nothing about film. Like, if
Yeah.
you're if those people that are sitting and watching or sitting and reading the film, and if it's funny to them, then like I think it's going to play in a room. If it's not funny to them, how can we fix it? What can be fixed? What's going to make it work? What's going to make it funnier? What's going to make the drama more effective? Anything like that. And so from the beginning, I'm asking for input, and I'm very big on, best idea wins, and anyone can bring an idea to me at any time. And that idea is at least going to be heard. And, that goes from a PA all the way up to producer. And so then, like, once we're through the filming process, when the film is in a good place, usually probably around the third or fourth cut, depending on how generous your editor is. um, that's when we start sending it out for notes from people, um, and starting to fine tune it. Um, I I I have some that I have some people that I really trust on that. But that one I tend to cast a bit broader of a net because I there's some film friends that I really trust that they can tell me that the exact technical issues of with the cut, I would say. And then I have friends that, don't know anything about film, and I still want their input because they're the one that might see it at SIF or something. And like, if it's funny to them, then that's what I want to hear. Um, so I solicit input from a really wide range of people, I would say. And I do it all throughout the process, because I want to try and make the project as best as I can. And I think the best way to do that is just to get as many eyes on it as you can. Um, and
Yeah.
certainly there's a limit to that, but I try and get as much input as I can.
Have you ever gotten feedback on your film where someone didn't understand something and you're like, well, that's just the way it is?
Yeah, I have actually. And it's tough, but I think it's also I think it's also important in the same way that, my friend giving me that note was important, that um there are certainly going to be instances where I'll make the film and like there are things wrong with it that fundamentally don't work and need to be edited or need to be changed. But other times, you make a movie and it just doesn't work for someone, or it's just not what they find funny or what they relate to or connect to in a story. And that's equally valid. I think it's even worth it to sometimes continue sending your work to that person just to try and get their input, because like I said, like, I want to get as many eyes on it as possible. And if someone is saying this isn't for me, then I'm like, okay, if this doesn't work for you, tell me what doesn't work about it. And maybe there's something in there that I hadn't caught. Maybe there's something in there that that does actually need an adjustment or confirms a concern I had about the film. So yeah, I've definitely been told this doesn't work for me, and that's always a little bit disheartening. But I think
Wait,
you gotta be,
that was their literal feedback. This doesn't work
uh,
for me,
yeah,
or just a
not
scene.
no, just like in general, like
Oh, okay.
it just didn't work for them, and
Okay.
I think always trying to like dig into that,
Yeah.
and at least try and understand it. That's gonna be the best thing, I think.
Nice. What kind of advice would you give to others looking to make a similar transition into the industry like you have?
I mean, when you're starting out, I think it's really important to make a lot of stuff. Um, I I had like made a lot of stuff when I was like 18, 19, and then I stopped making stuff for probably about 5 years, and then I started making stuff again. Um, and there were certainly good reasons for that, but I think if you want to make things, you just got to make things, you know. No one's ever going to give you the permission to make things. No one's ever going to say, hey, you delivered that water bottle really well. Do you want to direct the next scene? Like, that's never going to happen.
Right.
And so you just got to go out and make things. You got to go out and create your own opportunities. And I think the single most important piece of advice I could offer anyone is to keep going. Like, there's that David Fincher quote that I think about a lot, where he said like if he was ever like teaching in a film school or like talking to film students, like the number one thing he would do is like make them stand up and pitch him his ideas and then shout them down, and then if they keep going, then they have a chance, because it's true. Like every like I cannot tell you how many times throughout my career I have been told no, or been told that's a bad idea, or been told that's not going to work. And like, look, there were even times when they were right, but you got to keep going. You got to keep trying. You can't let you can't let that stop you. You just got to keep going, because you're if you keep trying, like you might figure something out that does work. And even if you fail, like you might take a lesson from it that you can take on to the next thing that does work. Like um, I think it's just important to not quit, because if you quit, like then you'll never know. And it's okay to quit. I want to be clear about that. Like if you realize, not for me, don't want to do this, that's fine. That's perfectly valid. But like if you want to keep doing, if you want to pursue it, then you just got to do it, and you got to chase it with everything you got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good advice. I often wonder if someone was going to set out to be a writer or director. Like I started as an actor, and it was because I tried it and I was like, oh, this is fun, But as a director or writer, as a writer, I guess you would get to that point of, oh, this is fun. I enjoy writing. But as a director, it's like, you really have to start. You got to direct something for you to go, oh, I can do this, What obstacles would someone have going into that as a director? I mean, is it just like you just get your friends together? Hey, let's make a movie. Get your phones out. Let's go. I'm going to be the director. I mean, what avenues do you go in starting as a director? Is it
Yeah.
probably based on what you wrote, right? I would assume.
Yeah, I mean it certainly depends. I mean, I think everyone approaches it differently, and there's, it's like anything, there's a gazillion paths. But the way I got started was I had, like I said, I have always um, been a writer. My background has always been in writing. And so I would write a script, and then I would reach out to some friends that I knew were down to like make something. And usually, especially when you're just starting out, like, you can reach out to your friends and be like, hey man, I'll buy lunch if you like come make this movie with me this weekend. And like that's enough. Like I remember like that was half the reason I was able to do those like short a month for so long, is that like at first I was just doing like, we shoot a day at my apartment, and I'll buy lunch, and that's a movie for $50, $60, me,
Yeah.
two friends, and a camera. And the only reason that I wasn't able to do it anymore is because the ideas started growing, you know. Um, but I think when you're starting out, really just like getting started and like making things with your friends on the cheap, you know, buy them Taco Bell, you know, like if you can get away with buying them Taco Bell, then buy them Taco Bell and make your movie, you know. Um, and I think just getting started and doing it, whether you have a script, whether your friend wrote a script and you want to direct, whether there isn't a script and you just want to make it up as you go, because people do that too. Like, there's plenty of ways to get started, but the most important thing you can do is like get started and then figure out what you like and don't like about it, and then make another thing that like resolves that, because then the process is just going to start repeating itself and you're going to get into the rhythm and you'll keep going, and then you'll wake up one day and you're Steven Spielberg.
Of course.
Simple
It's
as that.
natural. It's natural. Marcus, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to dock the ship, but first I just have a handful of small questions. As a director, what genre would your life be if someone were to direct a film about you?
This isn't a favorite genre question, right?
No, but you can answer that too.
Man, what genre? I guess I'd go comedy, maybe a farce. Um,
Okay, that's
yeah,
fair.
maybe a surreal comedy. I'm really inclined to those like Barton Fink. I've been thinking about like those Coen Brothers movies lately, so maybe
Yeah.
one of those.
What's your
Yeah.
favorite genre?
I love sports movies. I
Really?
yeah. I get that response a lot. A lot of people are very
Well, because I look at your
yeah.
repertoire and I'm like, huh.
The thing about the sports movies I want to make is that they're expensive. They're, you
Yeah.
got to have a lot of money for them, much more than I have ever had in my entire life. But I grew up watching, Rudy, The Rookie, certainly all those like Disney movies, Remember the Titans and things like that,
Yeah.
Sandlot, and I would love to make sports films. I would really love to do that someday. That's certainly on the bucket list.
What's next? What are you working on in the future, near future?
Yeah. So I've got a feature that I'm kind of writing right now. I don't feel too comfortable talking about it, but it's in the works.
Okay.
And then the next project that I've got is a short called A-Frame. And that one it's a short, dark comedy. It's about a young boy trying to find a bathroom at Bible camp before it's too late. It's kind of like Uncut Gems, but it's imagine a young boy trying to not shit his pants. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the pitch on that. We're working our way through pre-production on that now, and I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, I'm just excited to make that later this year. It's certainly the biggest thing I will have made to this point, and hopefully it all comes together. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
What is your favorite tech?
My favorite tech, it's interesting because I'm not a huge tech guy, but I use two pieces that I would say, because with the Film Society we use one, and then for my personal film career I do something else. So for my personal film career, the thing I use the most by far is Fade In. It's a screenwriting software. It's really intuitive. It's just like a really rock solid screenwriting software, and I don't have to worry about Apple spying on me. So that's really nice.
Okay.
And then the other one being Discord. We use Discord for the Seattle Film Society, and I've had to learn how to use Discord very quickly over the past couple of months. And it's an incredible tool. It's a great way to maintain an online community, and it's just it's a really it's just I'm always amazed by the things that I can do with it. I think it just continually surprises me. Um, and then I guess I had to throw a third one in, which is also
Yeah.
cheating. It's probably Spotify, because I use Spotify for listening to my writing playlists.
You have a writing playlist.
Oh yeah, boy do I.
Interesting.
My writing playlist is almost exclusively it's the soundtrack to the David Gordon Green film Prince Avalanche, which was done by Explosions in the Sky. And in my personal opinion, that's like the greatest writing music that exists. It's like that and like just a shit ton of Tycho. Like that's it.
Nice.
Yeah. So
what are your thoughts on AI in the film industry?
it's tough because I by and large I'm very anti AI. But I just saw the new Tom Hanks movie here. And I know that there's been talk about how they used AI on set to kind of show the actors what they would look like um, while the film was shooting. And so I think it has applications like any other tool, and I think that's the most important thing to remember about it is that it's a tool like any other tool. It's gonna have its uses, and sure, you're gonna get, David Zaslav out there saying like, oh, we can use AI to replace all writers, but at the end of the day, like, an AI doesn't have human experience. It's like, you know, compiling human experience and spitting it out. But it doesn't have human experience to really use as a perspective in the same way that, you or I have human experience and can use that to shape our work and to like write something that really connects with another human being. And so I think it's just important to remember that it's just another tool in the tool belt. And as long as it's properly regulated and properly used and not used to just steal from artists, uh, then I think it can be ultimately just another useful tool in your belt.
Very good. And Marcus Baker, how can people reach you? What's the best way?
Yes. So everything for me is under Marcus Baker Film. That's my website, marcusbakerfilm.com. On Instagram, at Marcus Baker Film. Anything else on Facebook, Marcus Baker Film. And then if you'd like to learn about the Film Society, the website is seattlefilmsociety.com. And then Instagram, Seattle Film Society, Facebook, Seattle Film Society. We've got a lot of wonderful events coming up. Please be sure to check it out. And check me out. I've got a film that hopefully will be doing a festival tour at this time. And
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of stuff in the works. I'm always working on stuff, and I'm excited for all of it. So
Awesome. Well, definitely, we'll put out all the links in the show notes.
all
I
right.
appreciate your time. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love the show. I honestly, I was really honored that you asked.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll do.